let's talk wingers then. I think in the absence of actual football, transfers in November heading towards the January window tend to fill the space, Paul. And it was interesting this week actually with Antoine Semenyo and David Ornstein's report about this release clause that is in his Bournemouth contract. So it's 65 million quid reportedly has to be activated in the first 2 weeks of January. There's a report on how that would work in terms of it feels like it's a big fee up front and little add-ons elsewhere, etc. Obviously, Fabrizio Romano then went on his podcast and said Liverpool definitely have an interest in Antoine Semenyo. So, listen, at this moment in time, you could argue Liverpool have got loads of issues around their squad. Actually, winger might be one of them. We mentioned earlier, like they're not exactly blessed with tons of numbers. Mo Salah's AFCON thing, of course, plays maybe a little bit into this as well. We are off the back of Liverpool's, summer where they spent a lot of money, and it looks like potentially they're being linked with more moves in this January. Do you see this as anything that Liverpool could consider? Because he's a player, obviously, a lot of teams admire. We've seen Liverpool perhaps maybe in the likes of Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz perhaps bring forward deals that they weren't going to necessarily do because of the interest elsewhere, and maybe like say the player just so well that you can't afford to just wait for the summer. So and I suppose with this release clause being £65 million, it's a lot of money, but relative to transfer fees actually feels all right. Like it feels like a suitable fee for that type of players. Is this definitely something you could see Liverpool exploring when the window opens? I could. I think Liverpool historically have done some great business in January, certainly over the last 10 to 15 years. You look at like Sturridge and Coutinho, Luis Suarez, of course, Virgil, Luis Diaz, like you mentioned there, Cody Gakpo. So Liverpool do have a well-established history of, bringing in top players if the deals are right, mid-season. So, that release clause feels relatively achievable, seems fair. It's not, we're not talking 80, 90. It is a sort of level where Liverpool might feel comfortable. Obviously, Richie Hughes knows the player and his contract details well. And I think I'm right in saying as well, Semenyo qualifies as a homegrown player because obviously he came to Bournemouth from Bristol City, was it? And he's been around in English football for a number of years. So that is another big tick in the box because we spoke a lot about that over the summer, didn't we? Liverpool essentially having to do one or two things behind the scenes to make sure that quota was met. Freddie Woodman is probably the perfect example of that. So that is another big tick in his box. But, a small red flag for me is just Liverpool are still trying to fit in these players from the summer. All the money spent in the summer, is the solution to go and throw loads more money at it to bring in more players. It feels a bit Chelsea-esque. If it's not working, do it again and see if it works. I feel as though Liverpool should probably look to establish a bit of a blueprint for how to play with these new players. Isak, Vert, Ekitike, obviously getting Kirk has assimilated. All these new players, Frimpong, where does he fit in now? I think that probably needs to be the main plan, really, before you go and start looking elsewhere and just thinking that new players can be sticking plasters over the problems that are there. But as a player, I think he's fantastic. He would be a really viable option for the long term at Liverpool. I think he's only 25, is he? At a fee that is manageable. But I don't know. I think it's just me. I just think you start seeing all these big transfer talks again on the back of the summer, which feels like it only ended a few weeks ago. And Liverpool are having problems, adapting to all this high turnover. It feels to me like they don't really solve that by just doing more of the same. Yeah, it depends how you think, I suppose, as well, because listen, Liverpool still had Sadio Mane when they signed Luis Diaz, and they still had, they still had Cody Gakpo comes in. At the time, we're all thinking, well, is he going to do similar things that Roberto Firmino's done, and or whatever, like different roles or whatever. If Liverpool are looking towards a post-Mohamed Salah world, listen, when at that point will come in the next 2 or 3, whatever it is, and for 60, if you can get the replacement in the door for £65 million. And listen, Antoine Semenyo, with all due respect, he's a very good player. I don't think he's going to be Liverpool's third highest goal scorer of all time by the time if he did join. So you've got to put caveat that. But if you are future planning or succession planning or whatever, and this opportunity presents itself like it did with Luis Diaz, then suppose maybe, like you said, Liverpool have got tons of problems now, but
also you're kind of saving yourself against the problem in the future, I guess. And if Liverpool signed Antoine Semenyo, I've got no doubt about it. Even in the short term, he can clearly provide an impact, just like Luis Diaz did when he arrived. He helped Liverpool get to a Champions League final. With Semenyo, I suppose, yes, he could definitely do some business in the short term, but also long term, you mentioned before about like Liverpool on their winger situation. Maybe it solves a headache before it actually becomes one, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, you go back to that first ever press conference, don't you, with Richard Hughes, and he used the word opportunistic. Yeah. And this feels a bit opportunistic. He's having a fantastic season. I've seen one of the sort of spider diagrams of his progress, compared to last season, and he's come on leaps and bounds. He is only outscored this season, is he, by Erling Haaland. 2-footed, direct, very powerful runner. A real sort of progressor of the ball when he's in possession. And we've seen what he can do against Liverpool. I think he's got 3 or 4 goals at Anfield in his couple of seasons for Bournemouth. So he's certainly one of the players whose star is on the rise in the Premier League. And you're right, you could see a world where Liverpool are sort of getting the ducks in a row early for sort of post-Mo Salah world, and I think that's pretty much already what they've been trying to do with Ekitike and Isak in particular. But I mean, I think it might just be me. Just at the moment, I just feel as though Liverpool have got 101 problems that needs sorting, tactically, technically, physically, certainly, and bringing in more players just feels as though it's not the ideal solution in terms of how you solve those problems. Yeah, you might be right. I suppose again, we've both been doing these things long enough. Like when certain stories start leaking out, rather than certain names keep appearing, and then like more comes out. Well, like there's no coincidence. I don't think that this release clause news has come out a few weeks before. Like it doesn't do Antoine Semenyo any harm. That everyone knows. If you want me, I'm available in January. In the first 2 weeks, get your ducks in a row now, because. Yeah, it does him the world of good, of course it does, if he wants that big move, and which I'm sure he does at some point, with all due respect to Bournemouth. And also the fact that, it isn't just Liverpool being linked with him, by the way, City, United, loads of teams being linked with him. It might just be that if he's going to get his move, if Richard Hughes, who obviously knows him well, thinks like this lad is the absolute business, there's also probably, Paul, value in not letting him go to Manchester City, or not letting him go to Chelsea, or whoever it is. I mean, like, I'm sure that definitely plays a part in these things as well. It's like, yeah, he'd be good for us, and also, by the way, if all our biggest rivals want him, can we steal a march and stop him going there as well? Which I'm sure these discussions do happen from time to time. What's the downside of us not getting him? Well, not only do we not get him, but he goes to Pep, or he goes and plays at Arsenal, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I've seen a podcast with the Bournemouth director, Tim. I'm going to butcher his surname now, I do apologise, but it's something like Tim Bezbachenko or something like that. And he was saying, Bournemouth accept that they have to do business with these clubs when they come along. The likes of Real Madrid for Dean Huijsen, the likes of Liverpool for Kerkez, Zabani goes to Paris Saint-Germain. And also, it's seen as a feather in the cap for Bournemouth and how they're working, but also it's something that they can sell to prospective new players. Do you want to come join us? When they're having these conversations, they can sit down and say, look, if you come and do the business for us, you can go to PSG, you can go to Liverpool, Real Madrid. So it's not necessarily a world where Bournemouth are loath to lose their star players and just sort of get them, pardon the pun, cherry-picked anyway. They're open to it, they're receptive to it, and this is their model, which is, for me anyway, quite refreshing to see the clubs operate in this way, and it allows them to thrive. Them and Brighton under no illusions of sort of where they stand in the pecking order, but they're able to box clever because of the profits that they're making on these players who play well for them, and then basically move up the division. So I see no reason why they wouldn't view Semenyo in the same brackets as the players who moved on in the summer, and wish them well, and then they reinvest that whoever's the next up and comer, and they take it from there. Yeah, fair play to his agent, by the way, as well. Getting this news out, and also, I'd guess, by the way, I don't know that for a fact, and also getting that release clause in the first place. It is interesting, Paul, because to spin back to the release clause. Well, he signed a new contract, didn't he? Yeah, so obviously, fair play to him. So clearly that would have been part of the thing, which, to be fair, is something Alexis McAllister did before he moved to Liverpool. He signed a new contract in the October of 2022. 2 months later, he's a World Cup winner. 6 to 8 months later, he's a Liverpool player. So it's clever, and it's also a sign that these players sort of back themselves to go and reach the top, really.
Absolutely, I think it's genius, and we can keep doing it, because like I say, I always go back to Wilfred Zaha, who I think was a fabulous player, I really do, but like he kind of got stuck at Palace because the asking price just got too high, and he couldn't get out. Well, no, listen, he was doing well, he was getting paid a lot of money and playing football. I understand he wasn't trapped, but you know what I mean, like he definitely, at one point there was definitely a chance for him to go to Arsenal, and the fee got too big because Crystal Palace dug the heels in, which they, again, we're going to speak about Mark Gay later, they're prone to do. So fair play to agents. On that fee though, again, whether it's January or whatever, or whoever gets him, my guess is someone's going to buy Antoine Semenyo in January, would be my guess. Whether that's Liverpool or not, time will tell. But that 65 million fee, actually, it feels in the current market like not a bad deal, which is crazy to say, but Premier League proven lad who's of a good age is having what looks like to be a real blast off moment, for lack of a better phrase, in terms of his career, is really going skyrocketing. Like 65 million quid doesn't seem that bad of a price, really, which is strange to say, because it's a huge sum of money.
It's the going rate for top players, it is, and we know we've seen, you know, for my liking anyway, too many £100 million players, which I think is ludicrous, but 60 around that ballpark figure is what you'd get for a top player, really. I'd suggest, you know.
Tends to be like a Liverpool fee. I mean, this summer's the exception, of course, because they went and blown that out of the water with Vert and Isaac. But usually, this is the kind of market Liverpool, not in terms of player, age, club, fee. Like, this ticks a lot of boxes for me in terms of what Liverpool would usually go and do. Yeah,
I mean, I've got a general working theory that if you're under 40 million, you know, you're either getting a bargain or you're getting a player who might not necessarily cut it because of the way that the fees have gone. So, you know, you see some of the performances he's putting in at the moment, Semenyo, and you can understand why there is so much attention on him, why he is primed to take that next step, as you say. And yeah, that fee, it's, I mean, it say if Liverpool did bring him in January for that money, he becomes, what, 4th or 5th most expensive player of all time at Liverpool, which doesn't feel insignificant, but at the same time, the way the trends have gone, it seems probably about right for someone who's doing the things he's doing at the moment.
I don't think this is the last time we're going to have these conversations. It feels like, do you get the sense this is one that is going to rumble on for a little bit?
Yeah, no doubt Liverpool are sort of, you know, in the queue, in the pecking order for clubs who might be jockeying for position in January. And let's see what happens. Let's see how he continues now over the next, 6 to 8 weeks. And yeah, if Liverpool are serious about planning early for a Mo Salah-less world, you know, short term at AFCON and obviously long term once his career is finished at Liverpool, then they're going to have to get serious about bringing in a sort of big money wide man, I guess, aren't they? And Semenyo at the moment is fantastic.
And we've seen with, like you mentioned earlier, like the likes of Virgil van Dijk, Cody Gakpo, they were deals that Liverpool got done very early in window. Like obviously Van Dijk was done at Christmas time. Yeah. Cody Gakpo was in very, very early.
Boxing Day, we found out about that.
Yeah. So Liverpool have got precedent, for lack of a better phrase, of if they want someone and there's a deal to be done, pushing the button very, very early in December to make sure the lad's ready to come in very early January, which again the release clause probably helps that a bit as well. You can kind of do that like Real Madrid kind of did with Dean Huijsen, didn't they? That those talks were very, very quick in terms of, it felt like that was almost immediately into the summer. Like, there's a release clause, let's go and activate it.
Yeah. I mean, the release clause is something Liverpool like, and most clubs like, I guess, because it just eliminates the need for protracted negotiations. Yeah. Once you've got the green light from the player and his camp that he'd like to move, then I guess it's a relatively straightforward operation of getting that release clause paid. So, yeah, and you're right, you know, Liverpool have, when they have done January deals, with the exception of Diaz, you know, they've tended to do it early because it's not necessarily weighing up what might be needed for the second half of that season. It's expediting a deal that you wanted to do for the summer. Now, with Van Dijk, we know it was the summer previous and, you know, things had to be taken there, but Gakpo was one, wasn't he? Maybe wanted for the summer, but they brought him in because Manchester United were after him. Sturridge and Coutinho was similar because Liverpool needed attacking reinforcements. So, yeah, Liverpool do tend to, when they bring a player in January, they don't and ah over it until towards the later part of the month. They go and do it as early as possible. Yeah,
I never want players who you're reacting to a panic, and you want it to be a long-term thought-out process, and fingers crossed if it is going to be Antoine Semenyo, which it looks like there's definitely rumours about
it. And even Mo Salah, in January of 2014, Liverpool wanted him, didn't they? And he goes to Chelsea instead because he was sort of, you know, he had his head turned by Jose Mourinho, you know, but Liverpool wanted him in January, and, you know, when, like I say, when they do want a player, like you just said there, Steve, it's not necessarily a case of umming and ahhing for the entirety of the month over whether we need him. It's, you know, let's go and get him early and get him in and move on. Yeah,
the only panic ones are coming right at the end of January if there's been like an injury crisis and they've never tended to work out well. No, so you never really want to be doing that. Yeah, it's never been fantastic. Those late January loans. I'll never forget Ozan Kabak, etc. That was a clip from Journo Insight. To check out the whole show, head to redmenplus.com or click the link in the description.